ladies and gentlemen, in the blue corner, standing at a sleek 5'11", 245 pounds, the tumultuous tempest of technique, Thomas Lilly. And in the red corner, at a curvaceous 5'11", 315 pounds, the jovial juggernaut of judgment, John Cheryl Sheridan. A meeting of the masters of mastication. Turn your attention as they delve deep into all things lifting and more. This is Peak Speak.
All right, we're back. Another Peak Speak.
We are
really
back.
This is a release of an old Peak Speak, a unlisted Peak Speak.
Aren't technically all of them releases of old Peak Speaks because we record them and then release them afterwards?
Why do you ruin everything that I say?
Mostly because I like pointing out holes in your arguments.
Oh dear. Yes, this was the second half
controversial
of the controversial episode we recorded and decided not to release.
I like how it's controversial, but with the only people who know it's controversial are you, me, and Sam.
Yeah, pretty much. And the other people that we kind of leaked the episode to. Leaked. Sounds like fucking...
We'll release it for a certain amount of cash. You can send us your best offer and we'll individually release it to people.
Yeah. So you just send it via PayPal so we can stay anonymous, so it's like two-way encrypted.
Oh, no, I want
address.
Bitcoin. I want to be paid exclusively in Bitcoin.
Send your Bitcoin to John at definitely-not-John-from-Burley.com. All right. So in that episode, the second half, we kind of segued into talking about the growth factors for the sport and what we believe needs to happen in order for the powerlifting to continue to grow. So we kind of spoke about what do we speak about? We spoke about the need for the growth in the middle. Like, we're doing a really good job at the top end and at the novice sort of entry, but the stuff in the middle has kind of fallen by the wayside. That's about all the intro we need. So
yeah, I think everything else we say in the episode. So I think you should probably just listen to the rest of the episode.
Get your ears ready for some sweet Peak Speak ear candy.
Yeah.
Tune in again. See ya. Yeah, so we got posed the question from a good friend of the show, shout out Matthew Stenzel, that everyone kind of claims to want to grow the sport, but what are the actual growth factors? Like, what direction should the sport grow in? And I think that's a really important point to, I guess, segue into from the conversation we just had. We've talked about this before. I guess for me, I'm trying to think of like and I'm sure you're going to touch on the whole novice comp, and you just kind of touched on it because we both believe that that's certainly one of the biggest and best ways to grow the sport. Mm-hmm. One of the most refreshing people in powerlifting in Australia at the moment is a guy by the name of John Gabriel, and he's the first person that came to mind when Stenzel posted that question. So a lot of you won't have any idea who John Gabriel is. But you may be familiar with some of the stuff that he's been doing. So if you follow Marcus and you follow ProRaw and Big Dogs, you would have seen a new sponsor come up, Oz Strength. Oz Strength is a company that John Gabriel owns, and John is also the president of APL in Australia, so which is the IPL affiliate. So it's pretty small time in Australia at the moment. It's growing. It's got a bit of a following. The competitions are routinely getting 30, 40 people. So it's getting bigger. It's getting better. I coach John. John's on the Gold Coast. He's a fucking awesome guy. And he is sinking a shitload of money, not just into the sport, but into young people in the sport. He comes from similar to you, a very, very, very rugby-oriented background. And he's basically running the model. He's a very smart businessman. So he's got the business experience, but he's also got the sporting background. And he's running like... the combination of his business experience, his sporting experience, and trying to put that into the powerlifting model. So he's injecting a lot of money into supporting young people, flying them around the place, getting them coaching, supporting them. He's putting a lot of money into his competition. So he's all his competitions offer prize money. All the local APL competitions offer prize money. They've got the Anzacs on this weekend, so the Anzac Challenge. I think the prize pool is like 10 grand, something like that.
Which is incredibly impressive for without trying to be offensive, like a relatively small time meet.
Yeah. I mean, there's 36 competitors at the moment.
Yeah, that's a small meet by Australian standards these days.
Especially with that kind of money up for grabs.
Yeah, fucking oath.
The Pro Roll this year and Big Dogs this year, he's a massive sponsor of. So he's dropped a lot of money on that stuff. And it's out of his own businesses, out of his own pocket, and he's completely invested into growing the sport, especially for young people.
Yeah.
Like, it's completely selfish. There's the opposite of financial gain going on. Like, he's really refreshing. He's a really, really down-to-earth, cool guy. Got a huge heart for him, and I'm 100% behind what he's doing. Because like you say, you support GPC, you're part of GPC. I absolutely support GPC. I go to their meets, I take my lifters to their meets, just like I take my lifters to XYZ meets as well. Like, any meet that my lifter wants to go to, I'm going to go and support.
And
right?
that's the point that should be made, is that both of us are, in our roles professionally, coaches first. Yes. Like, I own a business and I am a professional coach, and then everything else comes secondary to that. And I'm the same. I don't care where my lifters choose to compete. I will support them in whatever avenue they choose, because ultimately that's what I'm about first and foremost. And then everything else comes secondary to that.
And we're not fucking pastors of powerlifting. Like, our job is to support lifters to make informed decisions for themselves. We're not parents, we're not pastors, we're not sellers of powerlifting federations. We're sellers of powerlifting.
Yep. And more broadly, strength training. Like, I coach a lot of people who aren't powerlifters, who maybe compete in powerlifting occasionally, but they're not. Their primary purpose in the gym is not, I came here to be a better powerlifter. And so it's about spreading the message that is self-improvement through strength training and the pursuit of physical performance. And some people choose to go down the road of powerlifting, and that's great. I love that. But it's not for everyone, and I understand that as well. And I think that's an important part of growing a sport, is knowing that not everyone wants to compete at a high level, that's like, fuck, man. Using the rugby example, like, I played rugby at a reasonably high level. I didn't play it well, but I played at a high level in the Canberra competition. I've played first grade in Canberra. There are guys who turned up to play fourth grade, and that's literally social rugby. Like, they don't train. Maybe they meet up once a week. They occasionally drink beers at halftime. Like, it's a social game. You're doing it for fun, though. And most of those fourth graders are ex-first graders who just don't want to put the time and effort into playing at a high level. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think powerlifting has trended towards elitism about, like, oh, well, you've got to have all the equipment and you've got to, like, look the part and you've got to have powerlifter in your Instagram handle and, like, all of these things, where it becomes this thing that's put on a pedestal for people. And it becomes this idea that, like, I'm a powerlifter, I identify as a powerlifter. I don't think that's a very an approach that is very conducive to a long-term commitment to the sport, because for most people, they'll get 2 or 3 years in, hit that real hard point, and just disappear. And that's not growing a sport. And some of those people drop out, and that's okay, because in the same way that I played rugby with a bunch of guys in school who never played again after school. Like, they hung their boots up after school and that was it. That's cool. Like, you're still involved in the sport, you're still building the sport, but it's not, like, you can't put all of your focus on the full-time powerlifter. The focus has to be on broadening the base, because it's a sport no one knows about. Yet so many people walk into gyms in the world and do squats, benches, and deadlifts.
It's funny you say that, because, I mean, we've spoken at large about this quite a lot in our personal conversations, but I think one thing that I'm changing quite a lot, or maturing quite a lot in, is that I used to get kind of annoyed at over seriousness when it comes to lifting. Yeah. But I mean, and you'll talk about that as well. But our proof is our pudding. Like, it sometimes it comes across as, like, we'll say things like, oh, nobody cares about powerlifting except for powerlifters. It comes across like we don't care about powerlifting. It's like, our fucking lives are literally
100%,
our businesses, our livelihoods. We have the most passion for powerlifting of a lot of people that you'll find out
I make light of the people taking it too seriously and stuff like that, because I've been that person, and I know that was not a sustainable model for me to be involved in this sport. Because and it's not that I'm saying you're a bad person because of that, but you have like, the thing for me is highlighting the fact that that's not the only path, which is the thing that I think a lot of people make a mistake about, is that the only way to be a power lifter is to buy all your SBD equipment and fucking compete in 5 meets a year and take it really seriously and schedule your whole life around that. And if that's your thing, great. Do you. Like, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. Like you said, I'm not your fucking mother. I'm not here to make decisions for you. I'm here to offer you the platform for making the best decision for you. And for some people, the best decision is to be a recreational powerlifter. That's cool. You don't have to want to qualify for nationals. You don't have to fucking join a federation. Do the thing that makes you happy and enjoy the process. But don't shame other people for not living up to your standards. That's the thing that shits me, is like, just because you have all the gear and you train 7 days a week and you fucking track all your macros and you take it really seriously, that doesn't make you a better person than me. Might make you a better powerlifter. Like, I'm not denying that at all, but it doesn't make you a superior person. And I think they're the people that are bad for the sport, because it's this elitist approach that if you're not one of us, then you're not one of us. Like, fuck that. Yeah. Let's get everyone into the sport and expand the sport that, it should be the most popular strength sport because it's the most accessible.
Yeah. And I think there's plenty of people who live and breathe it and who are passionate about it without that elitist attitude.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not saying everyone that goes down that road does, but there's certainly a vocal minority of people who get a little too hepped up in the elitism of it.
I like to make light of it in the gym because, like, my gym is amazingly equipped, and for example, we have 7 Eleiko bars, and 4 of those Eleiko bars, I don't know if you know about the power bars in Eleiko, there's a training bar and there's a competition bar.
Yeah.
And the only difference is like a slight PSI rating, and maybe the quality of the knurling is a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
But the PSI rating, you're not going to notice until you're squatting 400 kilos.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Nobody in my gym does. And the people that do it aren't using the Eleiko bar.
No, exactly.
And the only other difference is like the white cap on the end. There's a white cap on the training bar and a red cap on the comp bar. And the comp bar has a little IPF approved sticker.
Yeah.
And it's really fucking funny watching someone pick up and the person that does this a lot will be listening to this podcast, and I hope he laughs at it because I think it's hilarious. And now we kind of like take little digs at him, but it doesn't matter. Like, pick whatever bar you want. That's why they're in the gym for, right? But like, people will make a point of changing the training bar to the competition bar that's on the other side of the room, and like walking across the room to change to this bar. And it's like, go for it. The equipment's there for you to use, but it's just funny, like that kind of super passionate, serious view to the point where everything has to be comp specific.
Man, you know how
I've provided the equipment for it to
yeah,
go
exactly.
that way.
And it's great to have that opportunity. I pick the squat rack that I'm going to use based on which one's closest to the height I want to use. Like, I have like 8 squat racks. I'm like, okay, which one? Yep, that one. That's at my height. It's not quite. It'll do.
That's me in warm-ups, man. I call myself a warm-up cockroach.
Just
scuttle around until I see a weight close enough to the one that I want to use and quickly do a rep, and then scuttle away and find another
Thomas
weight.
hasn't loaded a plate in a warm-up room in 10 years.
I have, but not for me, only for my listeners.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think when it comes to the growth factors of the sport, like we touched on, the novice comps is going to be probably the biggest driving factor. In terms of the direction the sport needs to grow, Matt kind of posed that question inside it. What do you think?
I do think that the best way to grow any sport is to lower the barrier to entry. I think powerlifting in the next, I think strength sports in the next decade, 2 decades, will be really interesting to watch, because what we're going to have in 10 years is people like my son who are going to grow up in gyms that center around strength sports. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't discover powerlifting until I was in my 20s. I didn't know it existed until then. I've been lifting weights for a long time before that and pursuing physical performance in one aspect or another before that. but I didn't discover the sport. Like, my son's fucking a year and a month old. He knows what powerlifting is already because he's been to several meets.
Well,
like,
he's on the leaderboard in your gym.
Exactly. That's because we've never had a 56 kilo man walk into the gym.
Well, I'd like to see the proof of his numbers. I'm a bit skeptical, but whatever.
That's because you're a cynic.
From a more tangible perspective, though, because it's one thing to say lower the barrier of entry. How do you think that actually looks?
I think
how do we lower beyond novice comps?
So I think from a novice comp standpoint, you don't have to be a member of a federation, because I think that's an arbitrary fee that you're charging someone who doesn't know if they like the sport or not. I don't think you should have to wear any special equipment, other than maybe like shoes and a shirt, so you don't get your gross skin all over my nice bars. I think the rules should be run to the same standard. I don't think you should compromise on the standard of the competition. Like, if you play social soccer, they still use the offside rule. Like, you're not changing rules that don't matter. I'm not going to pull you up to take your fucking thumb loops off at a novice comp because I just don't care. Like, it doesn't make a difference.
That assists, 100%. I'm against you on that.
Yeah, but that's, again, because you're a cynic. But the rules that matter, like, I'm not going to let my judging team white light high squats at a novice comp just because they feel bad for the lifter. Fuck that.
Yeah.
Know the rules, compete in the sport by all means, but it should still be run, I think, to the same standard. It can certainly come to a more relaxed atmosphere. Mm-hmm. I try not to put as much heavy metal on at novice comps as I would at perhaps a GPC comp, because I want it to be a slightly more family-friendly, enjoyable, joyous occasion, not this fucking dark, angsty, angry thing that sometimes high-level powerlifting can become.
Just put on happy heavy metal.
Yeah, you can.
It's about living instead of killing, but still screaming.
So I think they're the big points, right? And then I think it's about having a pathway from that to the more serious end of powerlifting. And it's a speech I give at the end of every powerlifting meet we do, every novice meet we do. I say, look, here's the results we do, all that sort of stuff. And I go, okay, the next novice meet is here. If you want to take powerlifting more seriously and you enjoyed this, we also run GPC affiliated meets. You can be a part of that. There are other powerlifting federations you can also be a part of. If you'd like to talk to someone about that, please get in contact. You know, like and I wouldn't go to someone and say, hey, GPC is the only option in Canberra, because there are fucking 2 other federations that run competitions in Canberra. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be a part of those, great. Like, by all means, be a part of the sport. And I think having it made obvious that there is a pathway there is important. And I think continuing to remove the mystique and the elitism that comes with it. Like, you don't need a $300 SBD belt to compete in powerlifting. You don't need all of this equipment and all of these fancy training methods and all of this stuff that gets sold as like requirements of powerlifting. I think if you can remove some of those barriers, you'll be really good. I think again, coming back to it, it's going to be really interesting in 10 years to see what happens with this generation of people that have grown up pursuing physical fitness and performance. Mm-hmm. And I think having a pathway for that is important. So having things like teen and junior nationals and a pathway for younger lifters to compete at a high level against people of the same age, I think that's really important.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, I was running out of things to say, to be honest, so cool. Please.
I think we're doing a pretty fucking good job of the novice comp side of things, and I think we're doing an increasingly better job of, like, the really high level, the pro roll, the big dogs.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's that middle bit that gets lost.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think we need a little bit more emphasis now on what's happening in the middle, because I feel like the period of growth where powerlifting went from shit to amazing was when the middle stuff was in big focus. So
100%.
Like states, nationals. Now everyone's so invested in trying to get to the top end, and the newbies are really invested in the bottom end, that the focus on the middle has kind of lost its, like you say, mystique a little bit. And I think there's a couple of strategies that we could use in the country to probably make that a little bit better. First, we need to like we discussed in the Pro Raw episode, is cut back on the number of people competing in something like Pro Raw to bring back its exclusivity.
Yeah, it should, like, if you're going to run a high-level meet, it should be a high-level meet. You shouldn't be qualifying for a high-level meet if you're not a high-level lifter.
Yeah, I think there's there's become, because of the growth, because of the demand, there's a bit of a lack of solidarity in local powerlifting.
Yes.
So for you, it's quite different because you're the only one running the meets.
Yes.
In places like Brisbane or like Melbourne, where there's several people running meets of the same federation, I think there should be a little bit more communication and solidarity. I think there should be even like tournaments, like a league of powerlifting.
Like a series sort of.
Yeah. There's a group in the Hunter Valley, Fit for Kings.
Yep.
They run they do exactly that. They do a series of, but it's all novice. They do a series of novice powerlifting comps that culminates in like a finale, right? And I think that would be really cool to have in the middle ground, but something that attracts some sponsorship, that has some actual weighting to it, that attracts people to do it, because it's like you grow the number of the sport at the bottom end with the novice stuff.
Yeah. But you have to have a funnel to get those people into the middle.
That's right, yeah, exactly.
I think something like the Triple Crown that GPC is doing this year has the potential to do that.
So I think it'd be really interesting to see the outcome.
Yeah, so I'm coaching one girl who is eligible, and she's got a fucking fight on her hands at nationals, because there's like the top 3 girls are all within 5 or 10 kilos of each other in their qualifying total. So it's going to be a really interesting competition, especially because she's the only one that's eligible in the weight class.
Yes.
And so I think things like that, but again, that's rewarding the high level lifter, and potentially for some isn't enough to pull them away from something like Pro Raw.
Yeah.
And so I think you end up with, and I had this discussion with someone last night, you end up, because of things like Pro Raw and Big Dogs, I think it's somewhat, like you said, it's sort of diluted the next step down. Because people who would be at a high level in a federation are potentially ignoring the federation in favor of spending more time training for that next level comp.
Yeah.
And I think
why I love what John's doing with like he calls it the talent team. Like he's identifying young people that may not be at the top of their game yet, but he sees the passion, he sees the integrity, and he sees the potential for these people, and then he's investing in those people. I think that's what's really going to help take powerlifting to the next level, is people doing stuff like that and getting behind the sport, not only from a support perspective and a knowledge perspective, but also a financial perspective as well. Yeah,
for sure. And it's like, I don't think there's one simple answer to this question. No, I think it's going to be an answer that continues to evolve as we see the sport evolve. But I think ultimately it comes down to the motivations behind people. I think if you can be motivated, or at least be very good at pretending you're motivated by actually wanting to grow the sport, I think that's the important part, is making sure that it all comes from a desire to grow the sport at all levels. That's the important thing. Is I think growing the sport isn't just novice comps, and it isn't just high level invitational meets. It's everything. It's growing the whole spectrum, because that's how you build the next generation of talent. You know, that's how you get guys like Dylan, who's fucking amazingly strong already and has been competing for a couple of years. You know,
like 12 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And the biggest fucking 12-year-old I've ever seen. But I think that's the important thing, is that the focus can't just be at one level or the other. It has to be across the board.
I guess as a final point to all of that, and this is very very real of what I try to do and I have always tried to do, best thing we can do, like, as a community to help the sport grow, is be part of it. Like, go and learn how to ref your local meet. Go and learn how to spot and load, offer to spot and load. Go and fucking watch. Go and spectate. Like, the more support, the more people that are getting behind the sport, the bigger and better it's going to get.
Man, for the first time in, or one of the, I can probably count on one hand, in 5 years of running powerlifting meets, maybe on two hands, I could count the number of times someone outside of our community, like my gym, has volunteered to help at a comp. And I'm like, I don't expect it from anyone. I don't expect anyone to volunteer. I ask people, and the people that do, I do my best to look after on the day. But to have someone who is not a member of my gym, has no vested interest in anyone at my gym, volunteer to help at a meet, like, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, man.
And I really, really, really appreciate that. And I say this at every meet we do, like, helping run a powerlifting meet is the shittest job in powerlifting. Spotting and loading is miserable.
I love spotting.
I enjoy it, but it's not easy, you know. Like it's not that
it's work.
Yeah, it's not that I don't like doing it. That's me coming at it from the wrong standpoint. It's hard work. Like it's not easy. It's not a walk in the park. It's not something you can just check out and do. You have to be there and present and working hard to do that. And I think a lot of people just don't understand that. They don't get what it takes to run a successful powerlifting meet. There's a lot of work that goes into that. And I think you're right, being involved in that and offering to help. And if don't talk about loving the sport and not be involved in the sport. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that shits me. Is like, I'm too good for this and blah, blah, blah. Like, fuck, just support everyone who competes in the sport. And to be honest, just be a bit nicer about it. Like, be a bit more positive, because there are a lot of we've just spent the better part of an hour ranting and raving about shitty parts of powerlifting. There's actually a lot of really, really positive things happening in powerlifting.
Well, we're ranting because we fucking love the sport and we just want to see it grow and get better because we are so invested in it and we love it so much. Right?
Exactly.
So passionate
I think it's really easy.
We have a powerlifting podcast. Like,
exactly.
You can't love it without. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think just being a bit more positive about it and being nicer to people and being a bit more friendly about, like, make this an approachable sport. Be nice to people. You don't have to be an angry bastard just to lift heavy weights.
Awesome, man. I think that's a good... We've been going for ages, so I think that's a good place to cut it.
Hey,
people... well, I haven't spoken to John about this, but he'll agree anyway. We're pretty keen to get some more guests on the show, and I'd really like to hear from who you want to hear us have on the show, and we'll reach out to them and see if they want to be a guest presenter. I've got a couple of people in mind, but I think it'd be cool to have a couple more international people on the show. So if you've got any people in mind,
maybe we put a little Instagram shout out question thing about who people would like to see on the show.
Sounds good. Done.
Excellent.
All right. I am at Tombro7 or at @0_weakness on Instagram. Find me, follow me, love me.
I am at Just Shero, and my gym is at Burley Strength on all the good platforms, by which I mean Facebook and Instagram, because I'm too lazy for
follow
Twitter.
him, love him.
Indeed. Tell your mum, share it with your friends, tag us in your Instagram things, etc., etc.
All right. See you next time.